So now we're moving on to a fairly familiar area for you, which is to go through the poem and to highlight key features and to analyse it. But this time that we're going to do it a little bit differently. If you remember, we're building your skills. Now this is 2 lessons work, which is why you can see it's been saved for a week 1 where we have got the 4th lesson. All right, so is to first of all highlight the positive imagery in the poem in one colour and then highlight the negative imagery in another colour. What do you notice about it? Just a little sentence somewhere. Okay. Then in line 1, have a look at festered in the heart. The language is associated with decay, but what is happening to the heart? Can you explain your understanding? And again, you simply highlight it and you make a little note. It's language associated with decay, but then you extend that little bit of analysis there. A couple of words will do it. And then in the second line, you want heavy-headed. What does this personification reflect? Again, can you see what we're doing? We're kind of building up the highlighting and the annotation of the key moments in the poem, but you are adding in a little bit more of your knowledge now. In line 3, what has happened to the flax plants and is there beauty there? Does he find it beautiful at that moment? In line 4, how is the sun personified? And then in 5, highlight the oxymoron and what does that show? Line 6, highlight the sibilance. What does it sound like? Think about it. This is called the phonological sound patterning, or sound patterning rather. And it's kind of when they use sibilance, it's because there's something they're trying to highlight in particular, if you remember from our lessons. Lines 8, 16 and 17 highlight the childlike language. About what age is he here? And is it the past or the present? And how do you know? So those are things you need to find those lines and highlight the childlike language. How do you know whether it's past or present? And then clotted. You've already in the previous lesson, you've worked out the meaning of that. But here, can you see what we're doing is what image does it present to the reader and what's the effect of it? On 10, highlight the alliteration. And what image does that create? So can you see these little questions? They are all designed to say, well, look, there it is. There's the technique. What do you think now? Okay, so can you see we're putting the knowledge and the skills that you've picked up in the previous videos, we're actually beginning to deploy them a little bit more. In line 17 and 18, you highlight the conjunction or connective, you might know it as and. What does it symbolise? And hence the poem is autobiographical, with the poem reflecting back on his life. And then you highlight that short line of 21. This is the turning point in the poem. And what's the term for the turning point of a poem? If you can't remember, have a look in your notes, or if you've not written it down anywhere, have a Google. Okay. Line 22, the setting of stanza the second is the same as the first. And what does this emphasise? It's the same place, but his perspective has now changed. What's that emphasising? 24, 27 and 30, there's military language in there. How does it make the poet feel? Has there been a change of perspective? Just a little highlighting, just say, yep, there's been a change of perspective, and then a little note, what does that poet feel? Line 25, highlight the alliteration. What sound does it resemble? Again, we're back to that phonology of the poem. Line 28, highlight the simile, and why is it unusual? And what does it exaggerate? In line 29, highlight the onomatopoeia. Why does this threaten the poet? And consider the use of plosives. Now, if you remember, it's a long time ago now, when the days were dark and cold, we were talking about the sounds of words and letters in particular. So if you need to, in order to create a sound, if you keep your lips together or even your teeth, and the sound has to explode through those barriers, then you've got a plosive. So you think B, P, T, D, and so on. So, how is he using plosives there? Line 30, highlight the simile. What image does this create for the reader and the poet? And how does it make nature sound? And that's the crucial bit there. Line 31, how does the poet react? Has there been a change of perspective? And why? And you just need to write a little note in your anthology to explain why. Okay. Lines 31 and 32 highlight the personification. How does he feel about those frogs now? And how do you know which words are telling you? Line 33 highlight the dynamic verb, which is the verb of action rather than of thinking or feeling or being. How does this poem end? How does the poet and the reader feel about nature? Has the view changed since the start of the poem? And then there's a little paragraph task. This is a rich memory for Heaney. What senses are being used in the poem? What does the use of sensory language allow the reader to do? All right, so have a go back through. What a language, what words are connected to the senses, and as an overview of the poem, which is another area that, if you remember, we need to have a kind of think about, not just you analysing at word level, but having a sense of, in the whole poem, this technique is being deployed. Okay, just one paragraph. I don't need a massive essay. And then there's a bit of an extra challenge there for those of you who finish that quite quickly. You develop the above paragraph, the one on the sensory language, with another on what do the contrasting descriptions of frog spawn and frogs suggest about growing up? And again, point, evidence, explain, analyse the language if that's the way you want to think about it, or what's being said, how is it being said, and what effect does that how have on the meaning and the development of the meaning that Heaney is trying to get through. Okay, so as you can see, there's an awful lot to do. So this video covers the 2 lessons that you would have on Thursday and Friday had we been together in school. Okay, so the first lesson you go through looking at the lines, annotating, highlighting, making sure you're okay, and then Friday's lesson is to write those 2 little paragraphs. And if you'd send them to me next week, I'd be a happy woman. Take good care, sweethearts.